So yesterday we saw the Rambam. Today we're going to move on to the way it's brought in Shulchan Aruch and hopefully discover something new. Right, yesterday we finished, we learnt the Rambam. Let us now look at the Shulchan Aruch. So there are really two pieces of Shulchan Aruch that we need to look at, and one is in Hilchos Brachos, and one is in Hilchos Talmud Torah. So turn to page 4, and we will, let's learn the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Shulchan Aruch, top of page 4. This is in Yoreh Deah, Reish Mem Vav, Seif Vav. Isha shelomda Torah, yesh lo sechar. And this is actually the Lashon of the Rambam. He basically brings the Lashon of the Rambam. So we'll run through it. Should be able to go through it quite quickly. Isha shelomda Torah, yesh lo sechar. A woman who learns Torah does receive reward. Avaloi kischar ha'ish. Mipnei she'eina mitzuva v'isa. She will not receive as much reward as a man because she's not commanded. Va'af al pi sheyesh lo sechar. And actually, when I was, sometimes often you read something or you learn something, and especially with something as deep as a Rambam, you don't always appreciate all the nuances, all the subtleties. And it was only when I was looking over it again last night and preparing this in the Shulchan Aruch, which is actually the Lashon Rambam, that I noticed that this connector, that this little sub-clause, despite the fact that she has sechar, and therefore, what is he saying with this? Even though she does receive reward, tzivu Chazal shelo yelamed odom es bitei Torah. Chazal commanded not to teach your daughter Torah. I hadn't appreciated the first part of the clause. Despite the fact that there is sechar, in other words, when a woman learns Torah, it is limud haTorah. It's limud haTorah, and the proof almost is that she gets reward. And therefore, the chiddush is, despite the fact that va'af al pi sheyesh lo sechar, meaning that when she learns Torah, it is limud haTorah. You may well have thought, well, even though if she learns Torah, even if she's not commanded to, but if she learns Torah, it is Talmud Torah because she gets sechar. How can Chazal legislate then to say, don't do something So this is the chiddush, and this is something actually we will see in the comments of Reb Shach of the Avi Ezri a bit later. I haven't appreciated, I think, the full meaning of this. Despite the fact that she has sechar, what does that mean? That means that if she learns Torah, it is Talmud Torah. Nonetheless, Chazal commanded fathers not to teach their daughter Torah. That's the chiddush, and that is a chiddush. Okay, and then the rest is a quote verbatim from the Rambam, etc. B'ameh devarim amurim b'torah shebal peh, aval torah shebichsav lo yilamed eisa lechatchila. But if he teaches her, it's not kimlam tiflus. Says the Ramah, umikol mokoim chayeves ha'isha lilmoid dinim hashaychim leisha. The Ramah brings from the Ogur in the name of the Smag. Nonetheless, a woman is obligated to learn the dinim that relate to her. She has to learn the dinim that relate to her. She has an obligation to do so. It's her own obligation. And he continues the Ramah. A woman has no obligation to teach her son Torah, as we saw from the Gemara Kiddushin, right? Nonetheless, despite the fact that she has no obligation to disseminate Torah, to ensure that Torah is transmitted and spread, but if she does help her son or her husband to supports them in engaging in Torah learning, she shares the schar with them. She shares the schar with them. Park that thought. Just remember this remark. It's an important remark. We will come back to it when we begin to go into some of the hashkafa aspects of it later.
The remark says she shares?
Chilekes schar bahadaihu.
Oh, okay.
The schar of her husband or of her son. And I think it could be argued that, let's say she were to give tzedakah to a kollel, to a yeshiva, for example. Let's say she was in some, or in many different ways, you can materially or emotionally or whatever, support and facilitate proper limudat Torah, then she shares in the schar of that limudat Torah. That's a really important idea. Okay? Now, let's have a look, turn back to page 3, because we're going to learn something really interesting in the Torah. And actually, the truth is, we probably should have done this before we did the Shulchan Aruch, but we'll correct it. Look at the Torah. It's the second source on page 2. On page 3. Omru Chachamim. You see, the Torah is on the left-hand column there. Omru Chachamim. This is in Judaism and Reshim involved. Yeah, Hilchas Talmud Torah. Omru Chachamim. Kol ha'melamed lebitei Torah ke'ilu melamdo tiflos. B'amed dvarim amurim, says the Torah, b'Torah shebichsav. That's only if you teach her Torah shebichsav. That's tiflos. Aval b'Torah shebal peh. However, Torah shebal peh lo yelamed isa b'tchila. You should not ideally teach her, but if you did, eino k'melamdo tiflos. That's the Torah. Any comments, gentlemen? I'm just checking whether you are awake.
I can tell you, not yet, but yeah.
Here it doesn't talk about schar in any way.
True. That's not. There's something far more blatant and obvious, my friends.
So we say she should not learn, but...
No, this is about teaching. This is about...
She should not teach.
This is about a father not teaching his daughter Torah.
She shouldn't be taught.
She should not be taught. Yeah.
But
No.
if she is taught, it's not...
No, it doesn't
Guys.
say that she shouldn't.
It does. It says. No, Chavra, you are... you're not with it this morning.
I just told you.
Yesterday we learnt the exact opposite. Go up the page. The same page. Amru Chachamim, says the Rambam, which this tour is based on. Amru Chachamim, kol melamed es b'tei Torah ke'ilu melimdo tiflos, b'amed dvarim amurim b'Torah shebal peh. Aval Torah shebichsav. Don't teach it, but
Yeah.
Boker Tov Eliyahu. The exact opposite, my friends. You really are asleep. Nobody jumped out of their seat. This tour is obviously, from the language you see, he's trying to quote the Rambam, and he quotes the Rambam the exact opposite of what we learned yesterday.
Why?
Not why. The why is why you didn't chap it. That's the why. We're going to get to that. But hello, I can only do this if you're with me. Again, yesterday we saw in the Rambam that when do we say it is that a father should not teach his daughter Torah? That is, don't teach her Torah Shebal Peh. Don't teach her Gemara, the Lomdus, whatever. B'Shnayis will have to decide and see what this means. But Torah Shebechsav, don't. But if you do, it's not Melamdo Tiflus. In other words, when Chazal say that somebody who teaches his daughter Torah, it is as if he's taught her Tiflus, that only refers to Torah Shebal Peh. Torah Shebechsav, there's no Issa. Or it's not Melamdo Tiflus. The Torah then tries to quote the Rambam and says the exact opposite. Guys, please. Yes? Okay. The exact opposite. So what on earth is going on over here? Right? Says the Beis Yosef. Look at the Beis Yosef. It's not underlined, but directly underneath the Torah there. Right? Little column, Beis Yosef. You see it? Go to the third line, in the middle line. To'us Sefer Yesh Kan. There is a copyist's error. No. You don't get off the hook so easily. At least the Beis Yosef, he was awake. Sorry. I'm giving you guys a hard time. How many coffees have you had?
One.
No.
Obviously not enough.
I think so.
Okay. To Sefer Yesh Kan. There is a very blatant and obvious copyist's error. So whoever was writing this down, the Tur somehow, or rather, sure he's not ascribing it chas v'shalom to the Tur, such a blatant schoolboy error. What he's saying is that when it got printed, they messed things around. The printer got it wrong. The Rambam says the exact opposite. Adds the Beis Yosef, and it is absolutely self-evident that this is what's happened over here. The Torah is not trying to sort of quote the Rambam and then argue with him, and then, because then he would have. I mean, I think one can say very, very simply, at the very least, he should have said, the Rambam says da-da-da-da-da, but my opinion is the other way round, or something, as he would normally say, he would indicate. And since he didn't, and he's evidently copying the Rambam, he's just quoting the Rambam, the Rambam says the exact opposite. So the Beis Yosef just dismisses it as a copyist's error. The Bach, on the other hand, and that is Bayis Chodosh, not Johann Sebastian, as you know, says the Bach as follows. Right hand column here. So the line starts 3 lines down. Uma shemachalek ben Torah shemachsav l'Torah shebal peh hu mididorash Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah per kamo de Chagiga. The source of this is from the Gemara in Chagiga that we saw Hakel es hanoshim v'ho hanoshim v'hataf, gathered together in the midst of Hakel, men, women, and children. Es hanoshim ba'u lilmoit. The men came, the men came to learn, the women came to listen. Hataf loma boyin, asked the Gemara, why did the children come? Alma, says the Bach, I can infer from here, the mitzvah muteles al hanoshim lishmoya Torah shebichsav kedei sheyedu lekayem ha-mitzvah. The Bach does the following thing. What did the king read out at Hakel? Torah shebichsav or Torah shebal peh? Torah shebichsav. And it says the women came lishmoya. True, it doesn't say lilmoid, but it says lishmoya. So you see from here that it is incumbent upon women to hear Torah shebichsav. This is what the Torah is saying, right? That they have to hear Torah shebichsav. What's the point of hearing Torah shebichsav? What is the point of listening to the king reading Sefer Devarim? Kedei sheyedu lekayem ha-mitzvah, so that they should know to be mekayem the mitzvah. Im kain ba'al korchoch de Rebbe Elazar de ka'omer ki'ilu melamdo tiflus b'Torah shebal peh ka'omer. It therefore must be that when Rabbi Elazar says that if you teach your daughter Torah, it's melamdo tiflus, so that it shouldn't stand in contradiction to the Gemara in Chagiga, you must say, do you know what's melamdo tiflus? It's Torah shebal peh. But Torah shebichsav, that's not melamdo tiflus. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So Nochama, what's he saying? He is explaining that hold on a second. Sorry, I'm getting confused myself now. This is not good. Nochama. It's from Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who says that we see, Alma, he says, the mitzvah mutelas al hanoshim lishmoya Torah shebichsav. They need to listen to Torah shebichsav in order to know what to do. Melamdo tiflus, that's Torah shebal peh. That is the girsa, and that, of course, is how we have the Rambam, not the Torah. Again, sorry, I confused myself again. He brings a proof from the Gemara in Chagiga that what? That Ke'ilu Melamdo Tiflus must be referring to Torah Shebal Peh, as we have the Rambam, not as the Torah is quoting it, right? But he's adding a layer of meaning here, which is very nice. He says, why is it that you can't say that Ke'ilu Melamdo Tiflus refers to Torah Shebichsav? Because there's a mitzvah for women to come and hear Torah Shebichsav. So therefore, that is pshat in the Rambam. But he does add a very interesting line, which is that, which I don't fully understand, if I'm honest, and that is, he says that the reason that they had to go and listen to Torah Shebichsav is Kadei sheyedu l'kayem ha-mitzvah, so that they should know how to be Mekayim a mitzvah.
But
From the Chumash, you don't really know. That's a bit of
Rough, maybe women do.
No, nobody does. Nice try. Nobody does. Okay. So that is the Bach explaining the Rambam. Now let's see what he does with the Tur, the way the Tur brings it. V'hodikos v'arav. The Torah shebechsav lo yilamedei salachatchila nira shahitzi zem noshim rebelaz ben Azariah. Dekomem hanoshim boim lilmoid v'anoshim boim lishmoya. V'loi omar im hanoshim v'anoshim boim lishmoya v'lilmoid. From the fact that the Gemara does not say in Chagiga that women also come to learn, Alma dilachatchila lo yilamdu lenoshim k'moi la'anoshim limud derech keva elo shmiyo greda. With his sensitive ear, he picks up the subtle difference between lilmoid and lishmaya. What's the difference between learning and listening? He says, you see from this Gemara that you shouldn't teach women like you teach men, limud derech keva, a fixed learning schedule as such. Elo shmiyo greda, just to hear. Lefisha, temporary, occasional. Mitzvah hi k'may b'pashas hakel today she'yeda l'kayim mitzvahs. Avol limud derech keva lechatchila loy. Umihu im melamdo eino k'melamdo tiflos. However, if you teach her, then it can't be like teaching a tiflos. The have a tiflos, because if Torah shebechsav would be tiflos, then even a shmiya would also be asa. It can't be. If you teach her, it can't be teaching her tiflos, because if it would be considered tiflos, then even listening would be asa, and v'loi haya mitzvah lahakel gam anoshim. Then there would be no mitzvah even to be makel anoshim. Miu b'mitzvah, so then he adds what I showed you from the Ramah, but women who do need to learn to understand their own mitzvahs. Just give me a second. Before we get to just give me a second. That's the Rambam. Just give me a second. I just want to check something. So the Tur. So the Beis Yosef says it's a printing mistake. We have to see the Prisha as well. What did you want to ask?
No, it just sounded to me like we tried before that, like 2 sentences before, to maybe ask the question, what's the difference between lilmod and lishmoa?
Yes.
So now at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like we say it's the same. Like it's because he says if it's lishmoa should also be
No, there are two separate things. There are two separate things.
But
Lishmoya is much more casual, occasional, and not fixed, and not so much in depth.
Mm-hmm.
No, they are different. They're different. And the fact that the Gemara says for men lilmaid and for women lishmoya shows you for sure they're two different things. There's no question they're two different things.
Right, but then we say afilo shmiya derech.
But if it would be forbidden to teach her,
yeah,
then even shmiya would also be asa. That's a chiddush he's saying. Yes. It would include, it's a form of learning.
Right.
It's a form of learning. It's a less intense, it's more occasional, it's not so fixed. But if it would be absolutely also to do limud, then we wouldn't encourage them to come to even lishmaya. Even though it's it's a much less intense
right.
form of learning.
But it
is a form of learning.
Aspect, so therefore shmiya must be included in limud.
Yes, it's a much less intense form of limud. You're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, it is a less intense form of limud, and therefore he shows that it must be that it is that. So therefore, it must be that it can't be melamdo tiflos, because if it was melamdo tiflos, then even shmir would be asa. Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay.
Let's see the Prisha. Says the Prisha, "B'maimani ubismag kosav ipcha." Yeah. So he points out, like the Beis Yosef did, that it's the opposite. Because Beis Yosef it's a tos, umikol mokom yesh liten ta'am ktsas legirsas sifrei hatur shebechulam nichtav v'nidvusu kach mipnei sheyesh hefsed yosa. Now here the Prisha says a really interesting point. He says as follows. He says he wants to give. It's interesting. I'm not sure why he's doing this, because on the one hand he it is a tos, it is a copyist's error, it would seem. On the other hand, he said, given the fact that in all the versions of the Torah it was printed this way, so it sounds like he's hedging his bets somewhat. But he says there is maybe yeshlitin tam ktsas to the girsa that the Torah had. Maybe there is a certain logic to it, and it is as follows. Mipnei, and this is really interesting, Mipnei sheyesh hefsed yoser kshemoitzi oter shebichsav b'divrei havoi me'asher yesh b'torah sheba'al peh v'kal lahovin. He says the most fascinating thing, and really it should be a subject for discussion. What would be worse? If somebody would misconstrue or warp or pervert the understanding of psukim or the understanding of a sugya of Gemara.
Psukim.
That's what he says.
Right.
He says, Hefsed yoser k'shemoitzi haTorah shebichsav b'divrei havoi me'asher yesh b'torah sheba'al peh.
Psukim would be worse?
Worse, yes.
Wow.
That's
Psukim are way more, I thought, like, Psukim are way more flexible than understanding of a Gemara. It seems to me.
The
like,
Psukim
I
are
don't
the
see how
essence of...
really, really good point. So go on, Sammy, what do you think?
I think Psukim are the essence of everything in Yiddishkeit. Like, that's the God-given word. Therefore, if, let's say, also women would have a wrong understanding of it, it would affect their whole Jewish lives. And
interesting. If I understood you correctly, you're saying because its grasp and reach is more universal, it's more general, it's broader. Is that what you're saying? As opposed to if you get one sugya in Bava Metzia wrong, it doesn't necessarily
have the effect.
I think something on those lines. I would go along with what you're saying. I would maybe extend it a little bit further.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be careful how I say this. Not that the Prisha needs my Haskama. He really, really doesn't, obviously. But some of the rubbish that is out there, when you take a parsha, I don't know, and it doesn't have to be super controversial, like the Akedah or whatever. The big arguments that I have had over the years with people doing exactly, if you forgive me, what you have suggested. I'm not saying you suggested to do that, but you open up a Chumash and basically you see what you want. Correct. Some people use the Chumash that they see it as being agenda. Absolutely flexible, and they use it just to propagate their agenda with very little basis. And this is the danger. There's a much, much greater danger to take a posuk, to take a parsha, to talk about Avraham Avinu, to talk about the Akedah, to talk about basically anything, and to make the garbage that is out there, and I'd say more than garbage, the danger of perverting Torah. Torah, to go and explain a parsha, there is always room for chiddush, but to go off on your own without any anchor, without any reference to the classical Mefarshim. We have a Masorah within Drush, and it can be very broad. You've got Rav Hirsch, and you can have the Malbim, and the Satmar Rebbe, and it's massive. It's very, very broad. But what it isn't, you snap it too much, it breaks.
So if we talk about distortion, then this flexibility...
That is his point.
Right, so then the flexibility in the Psukim
is the very problem. That is the problem,
Right.
and you absolutely see it nowadays. Mm-hmm. You absolutely see it. The so-called rabbis just getting up and using Psukim, you just have to have a good turn of phrase. And once somebody has learnt and absorbed Torah properly, you should have an antenna, and it should go up straight away to know what is innovative, what is it rooted in the... You can't just use a posuk for whatever you want. No. And the danger of doing so, and the issur of doing so, is much more it's much more dangerous. And says the Prisha, maybe those Girasais of the Torah that got printed the other way around, there is a certain logic to it. Even though the Rambam certainly doesn't say
it's not really a sofer mistake completely.
Well, he doesn't say that either. He doesn't say, he's saying that...
It would be understandable why...
Correct. Yesh litain ta'am ktsas legirsa sifrei HaTorah, which is a fascinating thing, and you absolutely see it. You absolutely see it today, without a shadow of a doubt. Okay. Mm-hmm. Having looked at the Torah, let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch over the page 4, and let's look at the Taz. The Taz here in the Yeridea says, Betur kosav ipcha, Taz Dalad, yes, to resolve Dalad. Betur kosav ipcha, v'kosav Beis Yosef, shetor sefer yeshom. Says the Beis Yosef, it's a tor sefer. V'ho'ika k'meshe kosav kan, and the main thing is, as it is written and paskened in the Shulchan Aruch. Not like the Torah, right? The opposite. As
so the Shulchan Aruch corrected.
Correct, yes, absolutely. V'hu nochen b'tamei. The Motzina b'Parshas HaMelech, Haker es Oma Anoshim, v'HaMelech ha'yaloim in Sefer Mishnei Torah, v'yesh lahakshais. One could ask, says the Taz, if that's the case, then even l'chatchil it should be mutter. Simple question, right? Like we saw, it should be mutter. If the king is reading from Torah Shemichsav, then for women as well, then surely that would be okay. Nirili, Dehosam le'dorosh HaMelech kim pshutei advarim. There, he didn't darshan, he just read, and he just did Kriyas HaTorah. And that, of course, there's no problem. That's not called teaching Torah. As we do all day. But to analyze and to get deep insight into what's going on, then osru lechatchila. V'zeh muvan b'lashon haTalmud, and that's what the Gemara means. Anoshim lilmod v'hanoshim lishmaya. Dahainu sh'anoshim lo yosimu leiv rak b'pshutei advarim lishmaya oisan, just to hear the very superficial, simple psukim, which don't tell you a whole lot in terms of the detail and the analysis. That's the Taz. Now, let's now go to the other Shulchan Aruch on page 3, which is, we are going to Orach Chaim Siman Mem Zayin, Hilchos Berachos HaTorah. Okay? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to build it up in an order, right? In an orderly fashion. This is Hilchos Brachos, Siman Mem Zayin, but it's Hilchos Berachos HaTorah. Mm-hmm. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Sif Yudalad, Noshim Mevorchos Berachos HaTorah. Mm-hmm. The Shulchan Aruch paskins that women in the morning say Berachos HaTorah. Okay? Now, before we go any further, I printed out for you, on a separate sheet, I printed out for you the sheet, there's a single sheet that I gave you out this morning. Mm-hmm. Do you see it? Yeah. I'm sorry that it's not the best print, I apologize. Sorry. But let's have a look at the Mogen Avram here. Says the Mogen Avram. Yud Daled. Noshim. Oh no, I messed up because it goes over the page a bit. Page, yeah. Sorry. I'll tell you, the reason I did that was because I want to do the Vilna Gaon with you here, and the Gra is on this page, and I didn't. So I'll go through some of it with you. Actually, it is quoted, but we'll see. Noshim. So it's the bottom left, yeah, on the Mogen Avram. Because they have an obligation to learn their own dinim, and therefore they say Berachos HaTorah. V'oid, unless you don't have, the chayavos. V'oid. The chayavos loima parshas hakorbanos k'moshe chayavos betfila v'im kein koi habrocha al zeh. Well, they have to say the korbanos as part of tefillah. Now, the korbanos are Torah. So if you read Torah, they have to say it, but not because of limud Torah. This is his second chat. So the Mogen Avram has two explanations as to why the Shulchan Aruch would paskin that women have say Berachos HaTorah, even though he paskins in Yeridea, they have no chiyuv to learn Torah. So how do you make a bracha on something that you're not mechuyev for? So the Mogen Avram gives two answers. Number one, they are mechuyev to learn their own halachas, and that's why they say Berachos HaTorah. Number two, it's not because of limud Torah, because it has nothing to do with the chiyuv to learn Torah. It's because there's a chiyuv to daven. And part of davening is Parshas HaKorbanos. Korbanos is psukim. You can't say psukim. It's also to say psukim without Birchas HaTorah, and that's why they do it. That's the Magen Avraham. Now let's have a look at the Gaon. Says the Gaon, Bir Agra. Have you got it? It's tiny writing, I'm sorry. Bir Agra. See if you dalad, bottom of the left-hand column of the Bir Agra. You got it? Ayin Magen Avraham. Do you have it? Find where it says Bir Agra. And go to the left-hand column, and the 3 lines from the bottom. You can't really miss it. See if you done it. Noshim. Ayin Magen Avraham b'shem Ogur. V'divrayim d'chuyim mikamo ponim. Says the Vilna Gaon that the Magen Avraham's words are rejected on many fronts. Very interesting notion, no? Divrayim d'chuyim mikamo ponim. Ukrot sovach. The Pasuk shouts. Ulimanatemo says b'neichem v'lo b'nei seichem. It says you teach your sons, not your daughters. Ha'eich toimar v'tzivonu v'nosan lonu. Says the Gaon, how on earth can women say v'tzivonu? How can they say v'nosan lonu? It's not true. Fascinating Gaon, we'll see. Elo ha'ikar. So he rejects, he says the words of the Magen Avraham are rejected. Mikam upon him. Elo ha'ikar, al pi mashal kosav toisvus, v'shar poiskim. The reason is something totally different, and he's coming totally left of field, and I kind of gave the game away a little bit earlier. This is a mitzvah saseh shazman groma, okay? We know that women can do it if they want to. A mitzvah saseh shazman groma, lulav. It's a machlekes. The Rishonim, it's machlekes Rishonim, Rabbeinu Tam, and the Rambam, and others, and for Ashkenazim, at least, which is interesting, we'll have to see how this fits, because this is the Shulchan Aruch, not the Ramah. So, but he says we know that Ashkenazi women, if they do a mitzvah saseh shazman groma, they make a bracha. If they choose to shake lulav, they make a bracha. Okay, that we can do. Right. So he said the same thing. Talmud Torah. We know that if the Rambam's paskin, right? We saw it in Yerodei Rish Memvav, we saw it in the Rambam, that if a woman learns Torah, it is Talmud Torah, and she gets schar like an Eina Mitzvah V'Isa. Just like a mitzvah saseh shazman groma. He says, therefore, in the same way, Noshim Mevarchus al Kol mitzvah saseh shazman groma, commission something else if you'd say, but after Kaiman Kilim Elam Dot Tiflos, you might say, but it's as if you're teaching her tiflos. Listen to what we have to unpack this Gaon. He now asks a question on himself. He said, do you know why women make a bracha b'Birchas HaTorah? Not like the Magen Avraham says, because they have a chiyuv to learn their own dinim. No chiyuv to learn anything, possibly. But for a whole different reason. The reason there is a bracha is because for the same reason a woman can make a bracha on shaking lulav. Mitzvah saseh shazman groma, she's potter, but she can still make a bracha. So Torah as well, she is not obligated. If she chooses to learn, she does get schar, like the Rambam says in Mitzvah V'Isa. Therefore, she can make a bracha. Asks the Rambam, the Gaon on himself. Well, 1 minute, it's not so simple. It doesn't say that if a woman shakes lulav, it's as if she's done something that we don't let them shake lulav because it's bad. And here we have something a bit more challenging here. It says, Tzivu Chachamim, not to teach his daughter Torah, because you're teaching a tiflos. So how can you say that something which Chazal said you shouldn't teach her, she then goes and does it, even though she may get schar,
and also says the bracha,
and she can also say the bracha? That doesn't add up. I mean, we could just, that's his question now. I mean, we could just stop here, park it for a second, and ask ourselves the following question. And this is really a fundamental question, as we'll see. Reb Shach and Abi Ezri asks on this Gaon. We'll see shortly, hopefully still today. But ask yourself the following question. How do we resolve, how do we put together these two ideas? If a woman learns Torah, she gets schar. She gets schar, ka'ena mitzvah v'isa, but she gets schar. But at the same time, this is an endeavor. Let's say she learns Torah Shabbal Peh. Question for you, simple question. And this we really need to think about. A woman decides to learn Torah Shebaal Peh. Does she get schar? Yes or no?
No, you shouldn't get schar for something which is also.
She decides by herself.
She decides.
Yeah.
A woman decides.
Yes.
I didn't. Yes, I was very clear what I said. A woman decides to learn Gemara. Does she get schar?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
What's the obvious question?
Why she doesn't?
Why does she get schar? If this is something that is not, for whatever reason, is not desirable, it's not a good idea. Tzivu chachomim. And that's why the Rambam said, notice, go back to what I pointed out earlier today. Afal pi. This is the Rambam is noting the tension. He starts off by saying a woman who learns Torah has schar. Not as much schar as a woman, as a man. And if you do anything, V'afal pi sheyesh la schar, tzivu chachomim. Now we fully get the tension here. I have two ideas which seem to be pulling in opposite directions. On the one hand, I have the idea that
she gets
schar. If a woman learns Torah, even Torah Shebaal Peh, she gets schar. Nevertheless, despite that, Chazal instructed fathers not to teach their daughters Torah.
But it sounds like depriving them from the schar.
Correct. Forget the deprive. Don't come with this whole modern entitled stuff.
No, I'm just saying. Let's
stick to the. Now let's stick to the. Let's stick to the concept. In other words, let's try and understand this. It has to make sense. And the Rambam, of course, it makes sense. The Rambam is resolving. He's acknowledging the tension here. On the one hand, this is an activity which is clearly an undesirable activity. That's what it would appear to be, because we're saying that Torah. Chazal tzivu chachomim, don't teach your daughter Torah, at least Torah Shebaal Peh. Don't teach her Torah Shebaal Peh. Tzivu chachomim. If you do, bad news. Malam tiflis. You know, but if she does, she gets schar. Does that? How do these two things make sense to you that they should coexist? If she does it, she gets schar. She gets reward from Hashem. You've done something good.
So it must be.
But if you've done something good, so how? But then don't go and do it.
So it must be that there's a major difference between teaching and learning.
Very good. Very good.
Right.
Very good. And that would appear to be the simple way of understanding it. And we need to still understand that. We'll come back to that. But let's see whether the Vilna Gaon goes along with this. Very good. Gabby, you got there. Now, a brocha. Let's go back to the Goin. Says the Goin, Va'after kaim alon ki'ilu melamdo tiflus. Even though we pass it, he says, how can she make a bracha on something which Chazal are telling us that if her father teaches her, it's tiflus? What would you expect the Vilna Gaon to answer at this stage? Why are you even hesitating? You just told me
right. So
2 minutes ago.
No, it's different because she's learning.
Correct. Thank you.
Right.
No way hesitating.
I just wanted to. Yeah.
You would expect the Gaon to answer this very good svara that you just said. That's not a question. I mean, it is still a little bit interesting philosophically that you can have an activity which is one for which, if she does it, it's all about the initiative. In other words, if she shows the initiative, then it's schar, despite or maybe because of, I don't know, that her father is not meant to teach her this. Mm-hmm. But she goes ahead and she does it and she gets schar. The Gaon should have answered, I would have expected the Gaon to answer, well, that's because one is teaching and one is learning. One is her own learning. Does he answer that? Let's have a look. Says the Gaon, no, that's only talking about Torah Shebaal Peh. When do I say Melamdo Tiflos is only Torah Shebaal Peh? Torah Shebichsav is not. Torah Shebichsav is not Melamdo Tiflos.
But didn't we just say that if she has her own initiative to learn even Torah Shebaal Peh?
Well, that's what you said, but the Gaon didn't. That's exactly the point. He did not take the the Vilna Gaon was put it very mildly, no slouch in the intellectual department. Yes? And he didn't take the obvious route. This is an astounding Biur Hagra. Let it just sink in for a minute. Let it just sink in. He didn't take the obvious route, which is the distinction between learning and teaching.
Can we derive from that?
Yes, good. We
doesn't get schar for learning Torah Shabbat.
It would appear to be so. Absolutely. That is what the Gaon seems to be saying. We're now going to have to go back and reread the Rambam and see whether that seems to make sense to us in the Rambam. But this is an incredible Vilna Gaon, and we're going to leave it here. Tomorrow we'll have a look in Avi Ezri, Reb Shach, in his magnum opus on Hilchos Talmud and Rambam, Hilchos Talmud Torah. He asks this question, and he says he absolutely doesn't understand the Gaon. But the Vilna Gaon is a really serious, important Mefarish, so we have to take it very seriously. Okay,